Elena Martinez arranged her 17 pens in perfect parallel lines, while the galaxy's most wanted pirates made the mistake of thinking logistics was boring. Coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, when the first distress beacon started screaming, but Elena's filing system had been predicting this exact emergency since Tuesday. She hummed an old Earth song about merchant marines while watching Commander Vexthak's squadron close in on what they thought was their biggest score in months. Her grandfather's chess pieces, carved from merchant hull metal that had survived Atlantic U-boat attacks, sat arranged in the formation he'd called bureaucratic checkmate. The pirates had no idea they were about to lose a war to someone whose official job description included ensuring adequate toilet paper distribution across 17 star systems. Elena's office was a cathedral built from filing cabinets and requisition forms, where administrative prayers were answered in triplicate, and bureaucratic miracles occurred with mathematical precision. The recycled air carried hints of metal, and the particular anxiety that came from managing supply chains across 17 star systems, while drinking coffee that achieved room temperature through sheer bureaucratic persistence. Her desk reflected an obsession with systematic perfection. Supply manifests sorted by cargo classification, delivery, urgency, and probability of administrative complications. Shipping routes color-coded according to a system that looked like abstract art, but read like sheet music for someone who understood the symphony of interstellar commerce. Elena's grandfather had been a merchant marine who'd kept ammunition flowing to Normandy, while German U-boats turned the Atlantic into a graveyard. His bedtime stories weren't about princesses, they were about Convoy PQ-17 and the Murmansk Run, accounts of supply officers who'd learned that the deadliest weapon in warfare was making sure the enemy's supplies were always in the wrong place at the wrong time. Logistics wins wars. Mia, he'd told her while teaching her to play chess with moves that weren't in any book. Bullets don't mean nothing if they're sitting in the wrong warehouse when you need them. Sometimes the best weapon is making sure the enemy's bullets are somewhere they can't find them. Elena traced the chess piece he'd carved from the hull of a freighter that had survived 3 U-boat attacks, through creative paperwork and superior customer service. The irony wasn't lost on her that while Admiral Cathara's morning briefings focused on escort deployments and patrol rotations, the real war was being fought by someone whose greatest tactical innovation was color-coding supply manifests according to emotional impact on enemy morale. Commander Vexthak's clause found purchase on his command console as reality rearranged itself around 50,000 left boots. His tactical officer stood frozen at her station, staring at inventory readouts that challenged fundamental assumptions about how intelligent beings organized their belongings. 50,000 left boots, she repeated, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone reporting that gravity had started working sideways. 0 right boots. They're all for the left foot. The silence stretched until it became a living thing, feeding on the collective confusion of professional pirates discovering that successful theft required customer service skills none of them had developed. Who? Vexthak asked, with the patience of a predator, realizing his prey had somehow become a bureaucratic nightmare. Ships 50,000 left boots to a mining colony. 300 kilometers away, Elena made a precise notation in her color-coded filing system. Convoy Tango 7. Decoy successful. Pirates now have a logistics problem more complex than their original target acquisition parameters. She paused to straighten a pen that had drifted 3 millimeters out of alignment. Some problems, she murmured, solve themselves through superior administrative follow-through. The first sign that Elena Martinez wasn't just another supply clerk came during Admiral Cathara's morning briefing, when the quiet human in the corner raised her hand with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that interrupting senior officers required diplomatic timing and proper documentation. The Admiral's scales had faded to the silver of long experience and accumulated wisdom. Around the conference table, 23 officers from 12 different species represented the finest military minds the galaxy had to offer, all staring at the human whose official responsibility was managing toilet paper allocation across 17 star systems. "Admiral," Elena said, consulting notes that looked like shipping schedules but contained probability matrices that would have impressed a statistics professor, Has anyone considered that fighting harder might be less efficient than making them fight stupider? The conference room fell silent, except for the hum of life support and the subtle harmonics of hyperspace engines, the kind of quiet that preceded either breakthrough discoveries or career-ending scandals. Admiral Cathara's expression shifted from professional courtesy to sharp attention. Elaborate, specialist, Martinez. Elena's fingers moved across her tablet, pulling up analyses she'd been working on during lunch breaks and late-night inventory reviews. Current pirate operations succeed because they know where valuable cargo will be and when it will be vulnerable, remove reliable intelligence, introduce false targeting data, and create logistics problems that exceed their operational capabilities. "You're proposing information warfare?" Commander Veltar asked, his mandibles clicking in patterns that suggested skepticism mixed with unwilling curiosity. Elena's smile was small and quiet, the expression of someone who'd just been asked why water was wet and bureaucracy was complicated. "I'm proposing paperwork," she said. "Really, really perfect paperwork." Elena's first demonstration wasn't military. It was bureaucratic warfare conducted with the methodical precision of someone who understood that the most effective weapons were often the most boring ones. She created Phantom Convoy Alpha Prime in the fleet database, complete with cargo manifests that read like love letters to administrative perfection, medical supplies for plague-affected colonies, listed with batch numbers that cross-referenced actual pharmaceutical inventories, crew rotation schedules accounting for interspecies sleep cycle variations, fuel allocation requirements that matched warehouse capacity reports down to the liter. The shipping insurance documentation was so authentic that Elena's own logistics staff began preparing supplies for a convoy that existed only in carefully maintained databases. "The beauty," Elena explained to Lieutenant Kesara, whose crystalline Valorian features reflected her screen in fractal patterns of fascination and horror, "is that the logistics look perfect. Pirates see what they expect to see because the supply chains make sense according to their understanding of how rational military forces organize resources. When Commander Vextac's squadron hit Phantom Convoy, Alpha Prime, which intelligence described as emergency medical supplies for plague-affected colonies, they found themselves managing 800 tons of therapeutic hot tubs, industrial lubricant, mislabeled as medical compound, and recreational ice cream makers destined for an Arctic research station that had requested additional heating equipment. The pirates spent 6 hours trying to figure out how to store equipment that required specialized climate control they didn't have, hazardous material handling protocols they'd never learned, and customer service obligations they'd become pirates specifically to avoid. Elena monitored the confusion while humming old Earth songs and filing genuine supply requisitions with methodical precision. Her grandfather's chess pieces remained in bureaucratic checkmate formation. "Pirate Tactical Assessment Update," she wrote in her personal log, using cipher that looked like technical sketches of nautical equipment. "Enemy forces, now experiencing inventory management complications that exceed standard raider training parameters, recommend continued application of administrative warfare techniques." By week 4, Elena had refined her methods into what she privately called weapons-grade customer service. The pirates weren't just failing to acquire supplies they needed, they were accumulating supplies they couldn't use, didn't want, and couldn't abandon without creating liability issues that exceeded their legal department's capabilities. Each successful raid created cascading obligations. Captured humanitarian aid shipments meant the raiders were now legally responsible for delivering food and medical supplies to colonies that depended on regular shipments for survival. Stolen agricultural equipment came with warranty obligations and technical support requirements that demanded expertise most pirates had specifically chosen careers to avoid. Elena's office had become the nexus of an increasingly complex web of administrative chaos. Supply manifests covered every surface, cross-referenced with shipping schedules that existed in 17 different realities simultaneously. Her coffee had achieved room temperature through bureaucratic persistence, but her filing system had achieved tactical significance. Admiral Cathara found her there at 3:47 a.m., surrounded by documents that looked like routine paperwork, but represented three-dimensional analysis of how supply chain disruptions could be weaponized against opponents who assumed military victories required actual battles. Specialist Martinez, the admiral said, her scales shifting to the deep silver that indicated profound concern mixed with reluctant admiration. Your phantom convoys have created unusual enemy behavior patterns. Our intelligence reports suggest the pirate fleets are experiencing significant operational difficulties. Elena looked up from a supply requisition requesting 15 units of agricultural enhancement equipment for a colony that had specifically asked for defensive military hardware. Her expression carried the professional competence of someone whose filing system had evolved beyond mere organization into strategic thinking. They're learning that successful piracy requires excellent customer service, she replied, making a notation that reclassified plasma rifles as soil improvement devices suitable for agricultural applications. Most pirates are surprisingly bad at managing complaints from starving colonies. The admiral leaned forward with the expression of someone whose understanding of military strategy was undergoing emergency reconstruction. You're creating logistics problems for enemy forces? I'm weaponizing their competence, Elena said reasonably, pulling up data showing pirate fleet movements becoming increasingly erratic as they attempted to manage captured cargo that required specialized storage, disposal, or processing capabilities that exceeded their operational parameters. Every successful capture creates additional problems that compound exponentially. The cascade effect reached critical mass when 3 separate pirate fleets coordinated their largest operation in months, targeting what Elena had designated Priority Alpha Emergency Supply Convoy, containing advanced medical equipment desperately needed by frontier colonies experiencing coordinated disease outbreaks. Elena monitored their approach while arranging her pens by color and regulatory compliance status, a nervous habit she'd developed during her first year managing supply chains that seemed designed by committee members who'd never seen actual supplies. Her grandfather's chess pieces caught the light from holographic displays, showing enemy formations converging on cargo that would transform their greatest victory into their most complicated defeat. Commander Vex Hack's flagship led the assault, supported by Captain Morvac's fast raiders and the mercenary squadron under Admiral Thexrat, 3 fleets working in perfect coordination to capture the most valuable prize in months. They found themselves dividing 0 tons of expired veterinary supplies, reclassified as emergency pharmaceutical compounds, decorative fountain equipment, mislabeled as water treatment systems, and Elena's masterpiece, 50 units of critical infrastructure support equipment that turned out to be luxury soap with labeling that violated environmental regulations in 14 star systems. But the real genius wasn't in the mislabeling, it was in the legal obligations. The captured supplies came with customer service requirements, warranty obligations, and delivery schedules that made the raiders legally responsible for maintaining healthcare services to 17 colonies while providing technical support for equipment they didn't understand and couldn't properly operate. Elena watched the chaos unfold while drinking coffee that had achieved the perfect temperature through careful timing rather than bureaucratic indifference. For the first time in months, she smiled. Grandfather used to tell me about merchant marines who kept the Atlantic supply lines running while U-boats hunted them, she murmured to her chess pieces. Sometimes the best victory is making the enemy discover that conquest requires more paperwork than they're equipped to handle. The final confrontation arrived not as a military engagement, but as a diplomatic crisis that tested whether Elena's methods could scale from tactical nuisance to strategic solution. The Hegemony Council had issued formal complaints about irregular administrative warfare techniques that violated 17 different interspecies trade agreements, while creating legal obligations their forces couldn't fulfill. Elena found herself facing Admiral Cathara's senior staff, not as a defendant, but as the architect of a strategy that had achieved what conventional military doctrine couldn't: complete enemy surrender through superior customer service. Specialist Martinez, Admiral Cathara said, her scales reflecting holographic displays that showed the current status of 3 pirate fleets, now functioning as impromptu humanitarian aid organizations. Explain how your methods achieve decisive victory without firing a single shot. Elena consulted her notes, real tactical analyses disguised as supply requisition forms with margin annotations containing more strategic insight than most formal military studies. Around the conference table, senior officers from 12 species waited for the human who'd revolutionized warfare through creative interpretation of office management techniques. Pirates operate on the assumption that successful raids end when they've taken what they want, Elena replied, her voice carrying the professional competence she'd perfected while explaining why certain supply requests violated regulations in 17 different ways. My approach made them realize that successful raids were actually when their obligations began. She manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the cascading responsibilities that had transformed raiders into reluctant service providers. Every captured humanitarian aid shipment created legal obligations to deliver supplies to colonies that depended on regular deliveries. Stolen medical equipment came with warranty requirements and technical support obligations. Food shipments included customer service responsibilities for maintaining nutritional services to civilian populations. Commander Veltar's mandibles clicked in rapid patterns that suggested his worldview was undergoing emergency reconstruction. You created a situation where successful piracy required administrative expertise that exceeded enemy operational capabilities. I created a situation where being a pirate became harder than being a shipping company. Elena corrected gently. They're not criminals anymore. They're small business owners with excellent customer service requirements and really bad inventory management skills. Captain Morthdal asked the question that changed everything. Could these techniques be applied to larger strategic scenarios? Elena looked around the room at 30 of the galaxy's finest military minds, all staring at her with expressions ranging from fascination to horror, and realized she'd accidentally stumbled into the most important conversation of her career. "Admiral," she said quietly, "has anyone ever calculated what would happen if we applied supply chain management principles to territorial conquest? Because I have some ideas about making invasion economically unfeasible through creative interpretation of occupational administrative requirements." The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that preceded fundamental revisions to everything the military thought it knew about strategic reality. 6 months later, Elena's methods had spread throughout the galaxy like a bureaucratic virus, creating both unprecedented peace and administrative chaos as military forces discovered that the most effective warfare might not involve warfare at all. The Galactic Military Academy's expanded curriculum included courses on administrative combat theory and strategic paperwork applications, taught by instructors who'd studied Elena's techniques through careful analysis of shipping reports that had somehow achieved tactical significance. Applications from human cadets increased by 340%, as word spread that Earth's children approached military problems through methods nobody else had considered using. Other species began developing their own interpretations, Valorian mathematical precision applied to bureaucratic optimization, Zenthari honor codes adapted for customer service excellence, and Keth logical frameworks designed to weaponize regulatory compliance. What had started as one human's creative approach to supply chain management was evolving into galactic recognition that the most effective battles might be won in accounting departments rather than battlefields. Elena remained in her expanded office, now featuring better coffee equipment and filing systems that had been upgraded to accommodate her legendary status, still treating logistics like chess games, where stakes were measured in tonnage and delivery schedules. Her wall featured a new chart, probability assessment matrix, enemy logistics vulnerabilities, which looked like abstract art but represented three-dimensional analysis of how administrative obligations could be weaponized against opponents who assumed military victories required military battles. Lieutenant Kesara found her reviewing shipping manifests at 7 a.m., humming old Earth songs while arranging pens by color and regulatory compliance status. "Specialist Martinez," she said, her crystalline features reflecting logistics displays in fractal patterns. Morning briefing includes requests from 7 different species for consultation regarding human resource optimization techniques. Admiral Cathara wants to know if you're available for strategic advisory responsibilities. Elena looked up from a supply requisition, requesting 12 0 units of emergency entertainment supplies for a mining colony that had specifically asked for industrial equipment. Her expression carried the professional satisfaction of someone whose filing system had achieved legendary status throughout the galaxy. "Schedule the meetings," she replied, making a notation that reclassified musical instruments as morale enhancement equipment suitable for industrial applications, and make sure they understand that effective logistics warfare requires proper customer service training. Everything else is just creative filing with superior administrative follow-through. Elena's grandfather's chess pieces remained in bureaucratic checkmate formation, museum pieces from an era when war was simpler and victory could be measured in tonnage instead of forms filed in triplicate. But some lessons transcended technology. Fair fights were for people who could afford to lose, and Elena had learned that everyone else needed better customer service and a filing system that could weaponize bureaucratic precision. The pirates never figured out they'd been fighting Elena's office supplies, and Elena's office supplies had been very, very good at their job. The universe had discovered what happened when Earth's children stopped trying to fight like civilized beings and started fighting like humans. They won through superior paperwork and excellent customer service, leaving enemies defeated not by superior firepower, but by administrative obligations they'd never learned to manage. The quiet specialist had finally spoken, and the galaxy was taking very careful notes, filed in triplicate, with proper documentation and customer service follow-through.